So you either typically educate somebody or you sell somebody. It's hard to do both. The webinar is a way to do that. To lead with value first. Well, what better way to prove your value than to actually demonstrate it? And then after you do that, make the offer at the end of the webinar.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Chris Naugle, and I've got a great guest for you today. And the reason I got a great guest is because it's a topic all of you are familiar with. Some of you need a lot of help in, and something that I do a lot of. So I'm hoping to learn something too. I got Jason Fladlin on, and we're going to talk about webinars. We're going to talk about how you can perfect, as he would call it, the meat of the sandwich, how you can make your webinars more effective. Jason, welcome to the show.
Chris, it's a pleasure and an honor to be here.
Hey, man, thanks for coming on. So this is kind of a topic that's become incredibly popular since COVID, because pre-COVID, I remember we were just on the road. Our teams were out speaking. That was just the world, right? Everybody went to webinars that you did live. But then everything shifted because we could no longer go on the road. The world was shut down. So we focused all of our time and energy on webinars that we did online. And I was an early adopter, I guess you would say, at that time, because I pivoted hard and we went and we started doing webinars. Today, we have 6 webinars we do every single week, and there's always more we can learn. We've figured out how to put butts in seats, but I think there's always a better way to make a webinar better. And I don't care whether we talk about virtual webinars or in-person webinars. Well, actually, I'd like to know, is there one that's better than the other, and why? And then I'd also love to just kind of dive into, how did you get into this role? It's kind of just a weird role. You know, you're the webinar guy. So how do you land as the webinar guy?
By accident.
Good answer.
Yeah, 2008 was the first webinar that I ever did. And I saw the opportunity to use webinars, I thought, as a superior advertising vehicle. Most advertising is annoying, it's disruptive, and it only justifies itself if the product you purchase at the end of it makes up for the annoyance factor of the ad. So you either typically educate somebody or you sell somebody. It's hard to do both. The webinar is a way to do that. To lead with value first. Well, what better way to prove your value than to actually demonstrate it? And then after you do that, make the offer at the end of the webinar. So I just liked it. I thought it was a great coaching tool. I thought it was a way to add value to the marketplace and differentiate myself. And 2008 was that perfect time where the technology was just there. Prior to that, I mean, you would be lucky if the thing didn't crash on you when you did a webinar. And also internet connections were too slow to kind of like stream up and down both video and audio and all that jazz. So 2008 was that perfect opportunity. And Chris, I was brand new in 2008. So I didn't have any previous successes that I could rest on and rely on. I always think of how like Tesla took over the automotive industry. They were fresh. So they didn't have any preconceived biases. They didn't bring in the baggage. So they were innovative and adaptive. So I wasn't already a person that could sell from the stage or the platform, which is an in-person kind of seminar environment. So I didn't have those things guiding me. I wasn't a teleseminar guru, which at the time was the hot thing online. I always felt that was transitory, that it wasn't going to last. And so I sat down with a blank paper and I was like, let's figure this out from scratch. And so that's allowed me to develop techniques that now are industry standards. But back then I didn't have a rule book or a playbook to read. I had to get on there and grind it out.
The cool thing about that is, when you look back to 2008, so I'm a little older, I'm 45. So, I was, financial advisor, pro snowboarder. I was doing a lot of really cool things at that time. And webinars weren't really something that we did a lot of. I remember seeing webinars or having at the financial firm, they would, have consultants do webinars but most of them would still travel and do seminar type styles. They would teach us in seminars, but we did start seeing that webinar style come. And I don't really remember back to that point as to whether or not I got more from an in-person or from the webinar, but it was a really unique time because that was right during the Great Recession. So there was a lot of knowledge people were seeking, but they couldn't just get it because, well, quite frankly, a lot of people weren't traveling just because there wasn't the money. The businesses were hurting. So it was a unique dynamic to launch a webinar business because I think it was number one, cost effective, not just for individuals, but for big corporations, especially in the Wall Street world. So that's why they started doing it. But like, where did you find your way? Because when I think of webinars, and I read a lot of books. So when I really kind of hooked onto this and said, there's something to this, was Russell Brunson, ClickFunnels guy. I read one of his, exactly. I read his book where he's talking about the potato gun, how he did a webinar every single week, the same day, the same time, selling a potato gun. First time, like there's hardly anybody there. The next time, a couple more. The next time, a couple more. But then he went on to sell lots of potato guns. And obviously now clearly did pretty well for himself. But he started with webinars. That's how he did it. So I just said, hey, if that guy can do it, I can do it. And I remember I did the same thing with the infinite banking stuff that I teach. I said, every Wednesday at 1 p.m., I'm going to do a webinar. Now, back then, from what I learned in the book, I was going to do the exact same webinar. Now, that was, when would that have been? 2019, 2020. That'd be a pretty boring thing if I did the exact same webinar each time. So I've had to evolve it. But let me put the spotlight back on you. And I kind of want you to walk through what it is you do, like how you've perfected webinars. And then let's just teach everybody something here and give them tremendous value.
That's wonderful. So, and it's funny you bring up Russell. So in his book, Expert Secrets, you can see I'm quoted in there significant portions with closes on webinars that I used. And in fact, with ClickFunnels, the piece of advice I gave Russell that really helped him, and we can dive into this further, is they were selling ClickFunnels and they were struggling with it. I said, make the software free and sell a product instead. And then you'll bypass all these issues of making the software. Well, what level should I pick? And should I upgrade it or should I not upgrade it? It's like, give the best thing away for free and teach everything else and then show what you taught there. You can buy this product and then you get this even better thing for free. And it revolutionized their business. And I have many, many case studies of people that I helped in the webinar space because I focus just on that, right? Not to teach it, by the way. I was using it. And then people kept saying, man, can you teach it? Can you teach it? Can you teach it? Can you teach it? So that's what we're going to do here today. We're going to teach what we consider the best, most, the biggest levers of webinars, right?
Love it.
And the first one is what we already talked about, is the offer. If you could sell a $10 bill for $1, Chris, how good of a salesperson do you have to be?
Not very good.
You kind of got to just convince them this thing ain't counterfeit, right? And you're like, hey, listen, I'm a monk. I'm now renouncing all material possessions. I got all this money. Can you take it off my hands? I just need a little bit to travel to an ashram in India. So just take all of it, etc., and then relieve me of this burden. Like anybody would say yes to that offer. Now we can't quite get there most of the time in our businesses. So we want to construct, before we sit down and create the webinar, we want to have the strongest offer possible. And that's where we start. Now, I want to loop back real quickly to something you said earlier. Let's talk about the hierarchy of the most effective ways to sell anything. The first one is one-to-one, in-person, nose-to-nose, toes-to-toes. You just can't beat it. And there's a variety of reasons for that. One is because of that personality and that rapport you can establish in a three-dimensional world. But the other reason is because you can calibrate. So if price isn't an issue for them, you don't have to spend 20 minutes justifying price or juxtaposing value to price or doing anything related to the cost. But if that's their primary consideration, then you could tailor the presentation specifically to that individual, right? The only downside of that is it's grunt work. It's long, hard manual labor. So while it's extremely effective, it's highly inefficient.
I couldn't agree more. And it brings me back to like the financial advisor days. I went and saw people face to face, toes. What did you say? Toes to toes, nose to nose. I love that. I love that. And I did that at kitchen tables, and I had a lot of success with that. But you could only serve so many people compared to today, where we serve thousands of people. We could never do that nose to nose. So I love that's called out.
So that's like a one-to-one scenario. So one-to-one scenarios are always going to be superior in terms of effectiveness to one-to-many scenarios, but one-to-many scenarios are more efficient. So then let's talk about one-to-many scenarios in a room with people is always going to be more effective than virtual. But the downside to that is you got to get a room. You got to travel to that room. You got to put everybody in that room.
Cost money.
And yeah, so again, highly effective, but not very efficient. And I think you should do it. Don't get me wrong. A webinar is a tool in the toolkit. And as you grow over time, you should develop a toolkit with lots of tools. So that way it's not the, I got to hammer everything as a nail scenario, the right tool for the right job. I've just found that for efficiency and effectiveness, the webinar seems to be the most leverageable tool because listen, whatever you're selling, the offer is the most important thing. How do I make this thing so good it would cost them more not to buy it than to buy it? So we start there anyway. And now what's great about it is on a webinar, it's usually easier to demonstrate that. But let's drill in a little bit further. Offers are only valuable related to the context in which they're presented. So I can't sell a Bible to a Muslim very easily. It's just the wrong offer to the audience. I can't sell the cure for male pattern baldness to a female audience. It just doesn't work. And so what I like about webinars is we can hyper contextualize the information to that segment of the marketplace. I'll give you an example. 2015, we did this promotion as an affiliate. So I was using webinars to sell other people's products and not just my own. So we were selling this product. It was $5,000 and we got $2,500 every time somebody bought that through our affiliate link. So we didn't even have the creator of the product show up on these webinars. Every other affiliate was promoting their sales material. We created our own. So we created our own webinars. And one of the webinars that I did was I was selling it to the general business market. Like, hey, listen, start this type of business online if you're looking to start, or add this type of business opportunity to your whatever you're doing, your portfolio online. Because Amazon back then was in this perfect timing where it was like, it was yet to be supply catching up with demand. So there was a lot of money to be made there. And what we were doing is we could sell to business folks, but I also would then go out and I would sell it to other audiences, such as chiropractors, such as options traders. And I could change just a little bit of the webinar and change the invitation to come to the webinar. So like with the options traders, I start that webinar and I'd say, listen, would you ever go into a market where you could only buy and never sell? And they say, no. And I go, just to be clear here, I want to understand this. Would you only go into a market that you could buy but never sell? And they say, no, Jason. I say, why not? And they said, it's stupid because I'll never make any money. And then I say, how many of you shop on Amazon? And everybody's like, I shop on Amazon. I so interesting. So that's a market where you're only buying, you're never selling, which is ironic because 57% of all Amazon sales come from third-party sellers, i.e. people like you or me. And then they're like, okay, you got my attention. So I'm able to adjust presentations and content very easily to different segments. So the offer becomes more valuable when you help somebody understand how it can be tailor-made to them or speak the language they best understand. And the webinar is very dynamic, which I like. Whereas these other funnels that you would build, they're more static. And so that's and the level of value is we got to have the greatest offer, and then we got to know how to point it and communicate it to the different segments of different marketplaces that are out there we can fish in and try to make some money from.
Love that. I love that. So we always start with the offer. Now, when I think of the offer, I think, well, I'm just going to go back to Russell. I remember the first time I saw him was with the very first 10X out in Miami, and it was a pitch. And then I went to 10X2 and it was a pitch fest. Everybody had this pitch, and that sometimes gets kind of slimy feeling. At the end, it's this multiple level pitch. Can you define an offer? And if it is that pitch, that multiple level pitch takeaway thing, I just had a guy on my 3-day, and unbelievable speaker, did phenomenal on the 3-day, from a sales standpoint, but like I'm watching it from a different, viewpoint than the audience. And I'm like, oh my gosh, dude, get to the point. It's like, make the offer, like tell them what it is you could do for them. And it just kind of kept going. So can we just drive into that a little bit? Because I think there's a lot of way when people think of an offer, they've seen them, and there's some they like and there's some they don't. And just one more thing, Jason, one thing I've had tremendous success on, and maybe we can interweave this into it, is when we do our webinars, we technically never sell. We give value the whole time. We let them know what we can do for them. We put the links up, but the whole time we're just basically showing them how to solve their problem without actually pitching them. There's no part of our presentation where it's like stack, or a pitch or anything like that. It's just, hey, at the end, if this is something you think will work, here's how you book a call. And that has worked phenomenal for us. It's a little different, but how do you interweave that? And what is the perfect offer or pitch? Or I don't want to say pitch because I hate that.
I love that you're bringing all this up. So, the world is very complicated and we always want to make it very simple. And so to your point, if I'm booking calls because that makes more sense for that model, then doing a hard pitch is going to fail. It's not going to be the most effective way to do it. But if I'm selling on a stage and there's 10,000 people, like at a 10X conference, right? My best bet is to bring the guns and close as hard as I possibly can, even to the point of risking offending some people.
Really?
So we have to, again, calibrate to the situation. Like Zoom brought me in to train their webinar users. It was 2 months before they IPO'd. And I came in and we had Zoom agree that here's how we pitch Zoom, by the way, to make this deal happen. We say, listen, your webinar users, if they don't do webinars, they're not going to continue to pay you for the webinar service. And they're like, yeah, that makes sense. And so we said, we'll train them for free. But we also would like to extend an opportunity to do webinars for them as a done for you service where they would hire us and we'd create their webinars for them. So is it okay if we solicit? And they're like, that makes sense. Because if whether they do the webinar or you create the webinar for them, they're going to continue to be a customer of ours because they'll need to use our software in order to have these webinars delivered. So I got on and when I did the Zoom webinar, I essentially said, I'm going to cover these 5 things related to webinars today. Of these 5 things, the presentation is the most important. I don't have enough time to get into the ins and outs of the presentation, but I have a book, just like this book right here, right? One to many. So I have a book. You can download it for free if you go to whatever.com/book. And I put that right in the beginning. And then I went and trained. And after, at strategic points in that presentation, I'd say, and also, this is how this relates to the presentation. If you want to know more, go here. So the funnel was very simple. Pure content, 100%, soft calls to action to get something for free. So not an offer. And then when they'd opt in to get that book for free, it was an ebook. They then on the thank you page had the ability to book a call. Would you like to talk to somebody about what it could look like if we created these for you? And the book rate on that from the live webinar was like 42%. So almost one out of 2 people who showed up to the webinar opted in and booked a call. Now that's a high-end service. If I'm selling $1,000 product, I have this other product that we sell. It's $500. That's all that it is. And it's how to create information products. One of the first webinars I ever created, 2008, still running to this day. Crazy longevity. And for that one, I don't need a lot of touching and hand holding. I just have to help somebody understand, does this make sense for me to buy it or not? So it's funny because Chris, in that webinar, I do the technique where I tell them up front what the agenda is. And I'll tell you how I came up with that. When I first started in webinars, I had this I didn't like what webinars represented, which was they're basically a bait and switch. They still kind of are, which is like, come here and I'll teach out of the goodness of my heart. Psych, gotcha. Now I'm going to sell you something, right? I always felt that was disingenuous in that there was something about it, right?
100%. I'm glad you brought that up because there's so many where they're going and they're giving this great knowledge. And I've been on these and my team's been on these. And then, like they get to the point where it's like, this is what I need. This is the info I need. And they hold that back. Yeah. And like, oh, and if you want to know that, here's, book a call. Or if you want to know that, you just sign up for this course. We got this live training we're doing. And it was just like, no, dude, like you lost me now. You lost me. Like you brought me here to give me value. Give me the value. And I'll probably want to hire you. But now you're going to hold stuff. You're going to hold the most important thing so that now I got to go spend more time because it's not the money. I think that's one thing people screw up on. They think it's the money. It's the time that's the valuable thing. And people don't have the time to waste. Like when they find something and you give them the value, they just want it. So give it to them.
Yes. So, and I want to talk about why in most instances. So I want to loop back on this, why we have to have a buildup. Unfortunately, in most instances, we can't just say, here it is, go buy it. We can't put the punchline first, but we'll get back to that. But like I told you, I had this uncomfortable feeling because most webinars where we're going to hit you over the head then sell you some aspirin. So they intentionally put you in a state of distress, and then they sell you the cure for it. I thought, God, that's not a good way to build a business. Forget the ethics. The ethics I think is horrible, but practically speaking, it seems dumb. So this is the first real technique I ever came up with. And I would start the webinar essentially like this. I said, on this webinar today, I have two agendas. One agenda is to sell you something. I just flat out told them right away. And I said, I'd like you at the end of this webinar to buy this product that I'm going to offer. And I'm going to do my best to make it irresistible to you. My second agenda, though, is to teach you X, so that by the time you're done with this webinar, you'll be able to immediately go out and do X. And this was like a very specific, very big, gigantic process, a promise that sounded almost impossible. And I said, so here's the deal. If I can't make good on teaching you X, I do not want you under any circumstance to buy the product I'm going to offer at the end of the webinar. However, if I do make good on my claims and actually somehow show you something where you feel you can achieve X with it, then you should feel obligated to hear every word I say when I make the offer at the end of this webinar. Do we have a deal? And everybody would say yes to that. And essentially, I just told them, I said, listen, I'm going to do my best to show you this solution. And then if I don't do this, please don't buy from me. If I do this, then you got to check out what I have, because what I have will take the solution I've given you and ratchet it up several different levels. Because our philosophy in selling has developed to where I'll show you how to do it manually. And then I'll give you the option. Do you want to continue to do it on your own manually, or would you like to get there faster, sooner, quicker, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So like even in webinars, dude, I could teach people how to go out and build like a pitch deck, for example, like the design elements, or I could just give them my pitch deck, right? So like for free, I'll show you how to build a pitch deck from scratch, ABC 1, 2, 3. Or if you want to spend a little bit of money, I'll give you mine. So we like offers like that, where it's like, we'll teach you all the information for free because we have the software that automates that, or we'll teach you how to do the process for free because we have the coaching and the support and the accountability that'll keep you on the path and focus you. We'll give you the option of either going out in the forest alone and hoping a tiger doesn't swallow you, or having a tour guide there and that can know the ins and outs and know where to go to get you there quicker. That's to me a superior framework. But when I started, I literally every webinar I just tell them up front, I got two things here today. One is to teach you how this amazing thing, which seems impossible, that you think there's no way in hell I'll actually be able to teach it to you. And two, sell you something. So I just put the cards on the table, and that made it easy for me to create these webinars, Chris, because I just had to go hard for 45 minutes. I had to pull off that impossible task. I had to show them that thing that they said, yeah, I doubt it, but I'll listen. You got my attention. And then they say, oh my God, he actually did show me how to do this thing that I thought would be impossible. This thing that I've tried for 1,000 times and failed every single time. He's now shown me, and I feel confident I can be successful in it. And so that's how I started developing that framework. The funny thing is back then, Chris, everybody started copying it. So every webinar, I could almost say, oh, here comes my opener, word for word. So I had to start adjusting and developing additional techniques just to stay ahead of people that were sitting on my webinars and copying my stuff word for word, and therefore invalidating it in the marketplace. It's funny how this works. So, but that was how I first started selling, when I was selling in mass, more lower ticket offers where you make a lot of money if a lot of people buy them, and you don't need the hand holding. It's not necessarily a personal service. It's like a coaching program that you do in group, or it's like an information product that they can download, or it's like a piece of software.
So in the webinar world, let's let the audience know, like when you say the lower priced offers, like how do we quantify like low price, high price? Where is the threshold in the webinar world?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, it varies from market to market, but here's how you strategically start to feel around to find where these different price ceilings are. There are certain products where you could just sell them one touch, no real interaction whatsoever, long form sales letters, or even short form sales letters, right? These are products that I liken akin to when you're at the store and you're checking out, and there's like a tabloid or a piece of gum, or like a packet of gum, and you could just throw it on there. Kind of impulse purchases. These are ones where people can make a decision very quickly and decide, do I want this or do I not want this? And those ones you shouldn't do a webinar on, because the attrition will cost you money. Because to do a webinar, especially a live webinar, is somebody's got to register for it first. Then they actually got to attend it. Then they actually got to stay to when the offer is made. And then they actually got to go to the place where they can buy it. And then they buy it. So there are a lot of steps involved in that. So for lower ticket offers, below a certain threshold, usually sub $100 offers, you don't need a webinar at all. In fact, a webinar would be counterproductive. Where in most markets you see a webinar starting to be useful is about the $200 to $300 range, okay, where it's something that people don't take lightly, and they need a little bit more insight and understanding of, does this make sense for me to buy or not? And generally in most markets, that'll go up to about a $2,000 price point, where after $2,000, people are like, okay, now it's a real serious investment. So I need to talk to somebody first. But I have been able to, with a lot of finesse and skill over the years, break some of these artificial price ceilings. But for most people, I'd recommend, if you get over a certain price point, it has got to evolve the model. The webinar can still be used like we were doing when we were selling $50,000 services with percentages attached to outcome. You can still use the webinar as a stepping stone in the process. But I like webinars, especially if you're just starting out, where you're selling out about the mid ticket of that market. So this is what people in the middle typically charge price wise. Let me charge similar to what they sell, but let me give 10 times the value, charge the same price. And that's a good formula in terms of putting it on a webinar from that perspective. Is I like about anywhere from a $200 to a $2,000 product that you can deliver. This is important. You can deliver at scale. So whether 10 people buy it or 10,000 people buy it, the cost of delivery and the speed of delivery is essentially exactly the same. And that's a really good way of selling on a webinar. But there are always exceptions to the rules. But I'll give you one more good one too. And this is a problem, the curse of my knowledge. I know so many different models and applications, so I don't want to overwhelm anybody listening here. We've done webinars that are paid webinars. So pay $25 and come to this training we're doing on Thursday. And it's a training that we feel that the only way we could do it that will serve it justice is live. And so they'll pay $25 to attend a webinar. And those are really good webinars in certain instances when you're teaching topics that you just can't show real value in an hour because they're too dense or they're too layered or they need a lot of unpacking and unwinding. And so those webinars they'll be like 3.5 hours of training with a half an hour at the end describing an ascension of where they could go with that. Like we used to do this in Amazon. We teach people how to pick products, and then we had a service that would help them pick the products. And we felt the only ethical way we could sell that product and make sure people didn't do something stupid and cut their own throats, right? Protect the customer from themselves in those instances, was train them for 3 hours first and force them to watch that before we would even consider taking them on as a client. So they paid a token amount of money, $25, which would justify us rolling this campaign out to find the ideal clients. And then in the last half an hour, they were intelligent enough to make the decision that was correct to them after they've seen the training. And so those are really good models too. It just goes to show you, Chris, like you work backwards. What's the outcome I want? How can I deliver the most value? And then does a webinar make sense? If so, how can the webinar be deployed in this specific context and scenario?
Your real estate business lives and dies by the network and the connections that you make. I mean, after all, your network, well, it's your net worth. That's what you always heard, right? If that's an area where you desire improvement, well, Private Money Club, it's for you. PMC saves you precious time and money by bringing the real estate world, well, right to you, right in the palm of your hand. So get in on the action like so many others have by going to privatemoneyclub.com and sign up.
So let's have some fun with this. Let's use a real case study here. And I'm just going to lay it out because timing's really good. So what the heck? I mean, I think this will really allow the audience listening to this to wrap their head around this. So 2.5, almost 3 years ago, I came up with the concept for the dating site for money, which today most people know is Private Money Club. It's the only dating site for money. And what I attempted to do is to simulate and mimic a true dating site, but to do it in the context of not dating and going out and living happily ever after, but to solve two problems, because there really are only two types of people in the world. There's people that have money and there's people that need money. Now, both of those people have a problem. People that have money have a problem, and that is they want to make more. And people that need money, their problem is they need money to make more money. So I've been on both sides of this coin. If we really sum this up to just a coin, there's two sides, heads and tails. Heads, people that have, tails, people that need. And the thing that has been missing in the marketplace forever is the connection, or the dating site in the simplest form. And on the coin, I call that the edge of the coin. It brings the heads and the tails together. So all I did is on a piece of paper, I literally drew a circle representing a coin, and I drew the edge, and the edge was the community in the middle. And I just created it. And I made it look just like a dating site. I made the app look just like Tinder, swipe left, swipe right, simplistic, simple, easy, familiar to people. And we launched this. And we launched it as a SaaS, as a membership product. And we did a massive lightning strike launch out in Utah, spent tons of money marketing it. We had a lot of success. Day one, I think at that launch, we brought on a little over 1,000 members into the platform. But what's happened is, we had a bunch of bugs in the beginning. So we lost some steam there fixing the technology because we did rush it because this is a technology platform. And now we are in the process of doing something that I didn't think I'd have to do this quick, but we are literally rebuilding the entire technology platform. And we're doing it in a way where it's going to be so revolutionary, never done before in the capacity of what we're doing it. And it's going to hit the world like a 2x4 to the side of the head. The problem, and here's my problem. I'm very good at the sales and marketing side, but with this company, I've sort of been forced over into now like my vision, the dream of like building this thing. And I've gotten so deep into that, I have forgot how to sell what we have created. And, we have a coaching program that we bundled with it because we had a software package, but people I thought it would be easy. I thought at $997 a year, people would line up to buy this thing because, it's easy, but they did not. We had good success, but they didn't line up and we missed our expectations. And then I said, well, the reason they're not is because they don't know how to use it. They don't know how to be the bank. They don't know how to go in and be a lender or a borrower. So I said, okay, let's create, a revolutionary coaching program that hasn't been done yet. So we did that, the 8-week accelerator coaching. And then let's create a certification program to allow members to stand out from one another. So almost like blue check marks or something else like we would be familiar on social sites. Let's create a certification. And when you get certified, your profile and your post all look different. But now that I've kind of given you the summary, I need to figure out how to sell this. And webinars are absolutely the best way that we've had success with, the Money School and Money Multiplier products that we do because they're all webinar based. So you take a technology company, and I love that you mentioned Russell and you had mentioned Zoom. So you've got background with technology companies. How do you sell it?
Yeah, that's a great question. In fact, the highest webinar performance I ever did in terms of making money was selling a SaaS product. We were doing $3 million on a webinar in some instances, just from start to finish. No replay, no follow-up, nothing. Just
wow.
We start the webinar 45 minutes later, we have to close it because we filled up our spots on the software of what we were offering, and we had $3 million in sales on the books.
What was the price point?
$10,000.
What?
Yeah, man, it's crazy right now.
Okay.
I'll give you a little context there. These were to an audience within an audience within an audience. So these were people who had bought a $3,500 front-end product from us and then were a member of our group coaching program that they paid $300 a month for. And only those were the people that we invited to the webinar. And furthermore, we made them sign an NDA before they even got on the webinar. Because what we were showing them, we felt was so volatile. This isn't a gimmick, right? We literally were like, what we're showing is so sensitive in nature. We can't have people just out there like spewing it and talking about it because it can completely invalidate how effective this thing is. So a lot of things to set up. This is why it's so important. Once you got the offer, work backwards. What's the best way and the best context for the audience to understand that value? So, but the point of it is here's why software is so good to sell on webinars, because you can demonstrate it. You can show them in front of their eyes.
Right.
It's similar to how like when Billy Mays would do an infomercial, they would only pick products to pitch that they could have a dramatic demonstration on, where he could say, hey, we're going to cut a hole in this parachute. We're going to use this tape to cover it up. And now watch me jump out of the airplane. So the demo factor on a software is really great. The downside of selling software is people have like PTSD related to software. They can account many experiences where they bought software in the past. They paid a whole bunch of money and then they logged in and they're like, I'm going to need an engineering degree in order to figure this thing out.
Yes.
And so people are very hesitant. This was the advice that I gave Russell, where it's like, you make the software free, and it's even better if you have levels, because you give them the highest level and you could say, hey, no, it's this much. I'm going to give you a year of it for free. It's a $3,600 value if you buy this $1,000 thing. And people say, whoa, yeah, I'll pay you $1,000 to get $3,600 in value. That makes sense to me. It's like, they get so excited about that concept. And so because you have a program that you put in front of it at this point in time, the ideal way to do this, now I'm going to speak generally here, because there's a few ways to do this right and there's many ways to do this wrong. So I don't want you, Chris, to just take this and go out there and apply it. There's a lot of nuance to this, but the general overall concept here is if we could attach some element of that software to that front end offer, that would be really incredible. So the software, how much would it cost for your membership, did you say?
$997 would be, that's like it's $1497 just for the software, but we typically will discount it down.
Yeah. So retail price software is normally $1497. I'm going to give you the software for free today if you invest in this $997 program that we have over here. And so now we have that same effect. Oh my God, the software is free. It's not something I have to pay for. And I get the ability to use the software before I have to pay for it. And then that will help me determine if I like the software, or if I don't like the software. And that's a really comfortable way for somebody to feel good about buying your product without it bypasses that first issue that we had. And they have all sorts of other issues too. Will I be able to use the software? Now, it sounds to me, Chris, you did something most designers I know and developers I know don't do, to my great bane, is you made it simple from the start. You were smart enough and intuitive to know that, like, we got to make this so a 5-year-old can use it.
Well, you know why? It's simple. I suck at technology. I usually can't even get the computer to work. I know before we kind of got started, I'm monkeying around with cameras. Like, I could barely get anything to work in technology space. So when I started creating it, it had to be a 5th grade level. Otherwise, me, the creator, couldn't even use the darn thing. So that's why I did it that way. And it wasn't by design. It was just by, I don't want to say stupidity, but I'll just say technology stupidity on my end.
Yeah, so that's going to be hugely in your favor, because otherwise people think more features equal better product, and the opposite is true. Less features, but the right features equal to better software. And so you already have that going for you. Now, the tendency, and we mentioned this earlier, so it's great how this all dovetails together, is the tendency is to go out there and immediately start demoing the software as soon as possible. I got this great software. Let me show you how to use this software. I'm going to wow you with this software. The software is incredible. It's amazing, blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera. But we got to build up to that point, ideally. For the same reason as like we got a date before we marry. There's a certain amount of foundation that needs to be set. This is why webinars generally can't be 20 minutes. There are some exceptions to those rules, but you usually got to spend the fastest, most quickest way I can typically change somebody's life takes at least an hour. Yes. I think that's super fast, but it seems like a lot.
I like an hour and a half.
Yeah. And I like an hour and a half better. And for more complicated topics and for higher price points, it typically takes even longer than that. And it doesn't mean that we can't be tight and focused with our content. We have to be, but it means we can't rush the job. We can't make a baby in 6 months. We got to wait 9 months. It's just how the thing works. And so in this particular instance, before I would even allow a cold audience who would never know that you even had a software, the software is the punchline. So we got to build up to that. So we got to show them along the way of what this would look like if they did this traditionally on their own. Then here's how this would look like if they did this with the solutions that they could invest in, the general solutions and the limitations of those, the good things about those, but the bad things about those. And then they start to realize, oh, okay, here's what I have to do. Here's what I can't do or shouldn't do. And right now I get it. And I know if I worked hard enough and could go out there on my own, I might be able to figure this out, but I might not be able to. And now your software, it can solve those problems, and I can try it out for free when I buy the product, because to your point, right? Like the software is like a tool that in the wrong hands is dangerous.
100%.
So you got to know what you're doing. You can't give a kid a scalpel and say, go do brain surgery, right? You got to know how to wield the tool, and that requires foundation and education. What would be great is if the foundation and education, and it sounds like it is in this case, is valuable in and of itself. So whether they use the software or don't use it, it's worth them to invest in the training program.
That's how it was created.
Better. Yep.
But we created it. The coaching was just created because I'm not a coaching guy. I don't like selling coaching because I've had bad experiences in the past. But the coaching was created because of overwhelming demand from the members on proper best practices. So we created it as a standalone first. And then I'm like, wait a second, let's bundle this so that now we're giving the education. And then as soon as they get the knowledge, they can apply the knowledge immediately in application with the software. So we teach, and then they apply. We teach, they apply. And that's how they get mastery of the system.
And that's absolutely brilliant. So you have also a differentiation from the competition. People typically do one or the other. They either have the software or they have the education. It's hard for a company to do both. And now you're the company that does both. So they say, wow, I can't get this anywhere else because I'm either going to get one piece or I'm going to get another piece. And I need both pieces. It's critical to have both pieces. So you're building up this case very logically of why this is the thing if they want the outcome that you're promising versus any other option that's available to them that they could pursue or get. And so then what's great is once you've set the stage, now you can reveal, now let me show you how we do this with the software. And so then that's the wow factor. That's the sizzle. And we show the outcome. We don't emphasize the software so much. I have to work with companies all the time on this issue. I'm like, nobody wants to buy a software. Nobody wants to come to a webinar, right? Nobody wants to take a training program. Nobody wants to eat healthy even, right? They want what the outcome of those activities will do. And for whatever reason, software especially, it's very easy for us to get caught up in what the software does and show all the bells and whistles and all the zings and the zangs and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, no, we got to continually have the GPS focused on the outcome. The software is just the thing that gets them there. And that's tough. That's hard to do because you fall in love with the software and it's its baby, but we got to always take that step back. And so that's how we present the software, not look at this great software. It's, let me show you how to do X. And then you push a couple of buttons. Did you see how to do X? That was awesome, wasn't it? Now let me show you how to do Y. And then you go back into the software, you push a couple of buttons. This is how we do Y. And then you start building it up over time. So where each on their own, it's like these little dosages of what it does here, what it does here, what it does there. And then you kind of combine them all together so they get the full picture. And then they're like, oh my God, this is unstoppable. If I'm going to be doing X at all, to not use this software and this coaching program would be insane. That's the conclusion that I want the audience to draw after seeing that webinar.
But it would be like what you just said, Jason. Like, yeah, I'm like, listen, I'm maybe different listening to you because I'm like, it would be foolish to not use it after you learn how to do all this. You'd be stupid not to do it.
That's right.
You'd be going back to the prehistoric days is the way I'd be looking at it.
Yeah. So we just got to make that clear to them. So in actuality, we know it to be true, but perceptively, we got to match up to that. So they better conclude at the end of this webinar, I either got to quit this and never dare do it again. Or if I do it, I have to do it with this because it would cost me more not to do it with this than it would be to invest here. And that's how we would work at it. And then most of what we do in webinars, Chris, these days, as I've gotten, every year I get better, which is kind of crazy because like I've been at the forefront for about a decade now in webinars, but there's so much more to learn and so much more that I get excited every single year I get better. And I've evolved in my webinar style to realize it's 90% of the webinar is stopping objections from happening. If we can get somebody to let go of their excuse that holds them back, then they naturally will grow. That's my philosophy these days. It's like everybody's walking around with these 100-pound weights on their legs, and then they're wondering why they can't jump high. We just take the weights off, and then they can automatically, as a byproduct, jump high. But people are teaching people with weights on their ankles to jump higher with techniques. I'm like, let's just take the ankles off, the weights on the ankles off. And so for our people that I would look at that would come to this webinar, I'd say, what are all the excuses that they have? We literally sit down and we would just write a whole list of them, big and small, each and every single one. Just one after the other after the other. Well, what would be the excuse if I showed them this? What would be the objection that I could potentially create if I showed them this? What would be the problem that they would have if they saw themselves trying to do this? And I would have I'd have this master list. And then what I'd try to do is I'd say, what are the biggest 5 to 10 objections that are going to hold them back. And of those 5 to 10, what is the most pressing one? What is the number one thing that this market would have as an excuse? Because here's the problem with selling anything is even if they see it's good, they're still not likely to buy it, because buying it requires action. Not buying it requires no action. Buying it requires now for them to take on some sort of responsibility. So if I buy this thing and I don't do it, then I'm going to feel bad because I said I was going to do something and I violated my own word. So it's dangerous and it's scary for people to buy things, even if it's obvious to them that that thing is incredible. And so we really have to go the extra mile to transcend this, because the safest, easiest, simplest thing to do is nothing. You risk no money, you risk no energy, you risk no time. But if you continue doing nothing, that's the ultimate failure. So we have to fight that, and they know they have to fight that. But when things get scary at all, the tendency of the human being is to retreat and do nothing. And so this is why we start working through these excuses so much, and we start working through these challenges so much, because it becomes obvious and evident what the upside is. So now we just got to eliminate the downside. So that would be the next thing is, and then my whole frame of the webinar would be around that one major excuse and just destroying that, putting the crack in that foundation, letting that thing topple and fall apart, while simultaneously eliminating these other lesser got you type of objections, while creating the end of the rainbow gold pot that's there. Like, this is the great thing, but here's a problem with it. Here's how you can get around this problem. Now, this is awesome, but here's the challenge with it. And we just focus hyperactively on, here are all the things that can get you back. Like, I'll give you one quick example. In the Amazon space, it's like people that are trying to start a business, they're like, well, I don't got a product. I can't drive traffic to anything. I can't build funnels. I'm completely inept on that from a technology perspective. I got no money to start my business, so I can't buy inventory. I got no experience, and nobody trusts me. I don't have any trust. So how the hell am I supposed to make money?
I don't know, man. I just was like, you're kind of dead in the water.
Yeah. So I go there, and so we try to find solutions that can stop some of these things. So like, we have a product that we sell. We're not the ones that created it, but we're the exclusive marketing partners for it. You sell other people's products. So you approach brands in a very specific way, and you become an authorized reseller. You sell products that are already established and exist on Amazon, that already have reviews, that have already been proven to sell. So you don't sell a product like that. You sell that exact product. How do you get over the initial credibility? Well, we help them develop, get training and certification. So by the time they approach brands, they're probably more sophisticated and intelligent than the brands themselves when it comes to selling these products, and on and on and on. But this is what's great about that, Chris. I start there. I said, on this webinar today, I'm going to show you a model that I believe, if you apply it properly, will work for you, even if you've never driven traffic in your life, even if you've never created a converting sales page, even if, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then we show them again and again and again from all angles, all those limitations. So in your particular instance, and you know them, I'm sure you know them because you know your audience, the things that hold them back from saying yes to the very thing that will make their life significantly better, we got to make sure they're represented. And that way, when a person starts to think about that after seeing your webinar, they'll say, well, that's silly. I can't think of that anymore. That's ridiculous. I'm playing myself short, and I get it now. And so then they buy.
Well, it's interesting because if the audience was really listening to what you just said, now let me just kind of go back and kind of just put in what we've done, because it's exactly what you just said. In the beginning, we were infatuated with the software. It's fun. It's easy. So when we did webinars, I would bring Andrew, our technology director, on, who's not a great speaker, but he knows the technology really well. And he would do a demo webinar where we'd show all the features and we'd talk through it, and we'd do a live simulated, because on a webinar, you can do a live simulated actual deal. And we would do that. Yep. And at the end, this whole time in the beginning, I'm thinking, oh, this is going to be a slam dunk. People are going to plow in. And then I'd look at the numbers and I'm like, whoa, we had 180 people on that webinar and we sold 2. Like, that was a miss. And now what we've done, now that we've got the bundle, we'll do a webinar. I might show the software for 10 seconds. I might pull it up and just say, look, here's one of those deals for 15% interest. And then I unshare the screen and we talk about case studies of how people have changed their lives with this. We show them up on the screen. We talk about like how you can protect your money, and how not to lose money and best practices and all the stuff that we teach in the coaching. But then we just keep referencing back. Private Money Club is where all the gold is. You're 3 feet from gold because it's right there. Right. And when we close those up, I haven't even really done any kind of a close. We just are teaching. Then all of a sudden I get the call from the team and they're like, hey, you guys did great on that webinar. I'm like, what do you mean? Well, yeah, 5 people bought the coaching and we got 3 people that signed up. I'm like, wait, there was only 80 people on there. Yeah. So you can see like, it's exactly what you just said. Like people don't want demos of software unless they're already a buyer of the software, then they want to see the software work, just solidify that final purchasing decision. But to a cold audience or even a lukewarm audience, they just want to see the problem solved. The software is such a little piece. It's just it's the gateway. It's the shovel you need to dig for gold. The golds are there. You just need the shovel. So if we could just give them the shovel and show them how to use the shovel the most efficient way, it works better. And that's what we have not done yet. We've played with all of this, but because we're now back in like, oh my God, we're going to create this vision and this thing. So now our whole team, every time we're creating, we take our foot off now we should go out and sell because we're like, oh, we're making this. Let's wait to launch this, which is backwards. So we definitely need help with that because I need to get my team, especially, Shauna, the director and COO, to kind of push that envelope and figure out how are we going to sell this the most effective way. And then we're really good at putting butts in seats. Our marketing team knows how to do that. But let's take a step back because I didn't ask you this. Do you and your team, do you teach people how to put the butts in the seats?
We typically don't. And I'll tell you why, right? First of all, we're okay at it. On a scale of 1 to 10, we're probably like a 6.5, right? But what we've discovered for us, because I love what you're talking about here, Chris, this is the bane of every serial entrepreneur that's ever existed, is we start multiple projects at once and we build the plane while we fly it. It's the way of the game, right?
It is.
I've made every mistake that you've just described 100 times, where we focus on content and then we let the sales dry up. And then we go back and focus on sales and we launch too early and the thing isn't optimized yet.
And we did that. So, did we ever do that?
Oh my God, I've done that so many times, right? And again, I will forget my own advice because it's easy to be objective for your stuff, right? But for my stuff, I'm not objective. I'm in the forest looking only at the trees. And so we have learned as I've gotten older, and I've also kind of gotten past my workaholic tendencies, which is like, I'll tell you what, man, no amount of money is going to replace a poor relationship with your family, right?
That's true.
That's a losing game every single day of the week. Same thing with your health. If it burns you out and makes you depressed, the money isn't like, it doesn't help you with your depression. If there's a hole in the bucket, no amount of water you pour into it's going to stick, kind of a thing. And money is the water you're pulling in, and the hole in the bucket is the hole in your soul, right? So as I've gotten older and slightly wiser, I've learned to try to stay in my zone of genius. And so for us, because we're so good at converting, we get traffic from other people because we can do more with their traffic than they can do with it. So the way we get traffic is not to need to get traffic. And so we use affiliates. So we did a $57.9 million launch about a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago, from scratch, 226 days from idea to implementation to $57.9 million in sales, right? $0 in advertising we spent because we had affiliates promote our webinars because they knew that it was going to make them more money than any other activity they could do, including in promoting their own stuff. And so we get almost all of our traffic from affiliates. I'm trying in year 15 now to do more cold, and we're floundering and we're failing at it, and do more organic, which is why I'm now on social only in the last year. Prior to the last year, I didn't have Facebook. I didn't have any social presence, no real YouTube presence, what to speak of soever. So now I'm just trying to build those things now. So we focus purely on what we're really good at, which is the conversion process. The webinar is a big part of that, but the emails that go out to get them to come to the webinars once they sign up, the follow-up after the webinar, when that takes place, the actual web pages themselves in the process from registration to thank you page to replay page to the landing page you send them to for the webinar. That's where we stay. We just stay as much as possible focused on that. because that's where we make the most money. So it's exciting when I hear people like you, Chris, say we're really good at putting butts in seats. Because
really good.
When I get clients like that or work with people like that, like if you take care of the traffic and we take care of the conversion, that's a multiplicative effect. It isn't 4 + 4 = 8. It's 4 × 4 = 16.
Yeah, I mean, we've got it down to a pretty good KPI science. I mean, if we spend $7,500 in direct marketing just to our social channels, because we got a big social following, we're going to put 300 to 400 people on there. And out of that 300 to 400 people, as long as like we did our job on the front end, we're going to hold 80% of them the entire time for an hour and a half presentation. Like we already know our numbers because we've done it. Gosh, I don't know. I mean, how many years has it been? 5 years consistently every single week. Do you learn a thing or two? It's kind of like you've been doing this 15 years and you've stayed very hyper focused on one particular thing. So you become the best surgeon out there. So, you can literally go out there and say, hey, listen, if you want the general physician, I'm not that, which is why I asked you about putting butts in seats. Because now all of a sudden, as you start taking on more and more stuff, you start becoming more of a physician. And I don't know if any of you know this. Now, physicians make great money. I live in a neighborhood with lots of them, but the surgeons, and then the heart surgeons and the cardiovascular surgeons, they're making real money. And they do one thing and one thing only every single day. And that's where wealth is.
That's right.
I love it. So you got a book. Let's just talk about that for a second.
Yeah, I wrote this book in 2017, not with any real intention. I just had a lot of people ask me about it. And I'm like, man, I need to write a book. The thing that lasts forever in business are books more than anything. So I just set it down to paper once and for all, because I really got frustrated and tired of people coming up to me and saying, oh, that technique that I saw you use, Jason, you learned it from so-and-so. And I'm kind of like, no, it's the opposite. I taught so-and-so, but they published it and they talked about it and they referenced it and they mentioned it. And I'm like, nobody wants a Xerox copy of the Mona Lisa. So I'm like, I'm just going to set the record straight. And a book is the dumbest thing to write from a financial standpoint.
Oh, you lose money. I'm on my 6th one. Everyone, it's a waste of money, but it's the best possible thing you can ever do.
Yeah. Indirectly over time, it may lead to a lot of money. And in this case, I got lucky, I would say, and it did. Because I wrote in 2017, but it didn't start picking up steam till 2021. And now it sells more copies in a week today than it did in the first year that we launched the thing. And so it's kind of become a cult classic over time. A lot of people bought the book, made a lot of money with it, and then they would tell their friends, and then their friends would go out, buy the book. And it really came to a fruition when Alex Hormozi, when he published $100 million offers, I was the most quoted person in his book. And his book today, last I checked on Amazon, was the #1 best-selling business book in the category of business. And so when Alex hit, my thing went through the roof. But my book, here's the other reason I wrote it. I created a $5,000 in-person seminar where we taught everything I knew about webinar presentations. And so some of the biggest legends in the industry, if you were to watch as a program called Genius Webinars, we did it in person, and then we sell the recordings for $1,500. And then I took that and I turned it into a book. I told everybody I was going to do this. I was like, we're going to train it live, then we're going to turn it into a program. And then from that, we're going to write the book. So literally in that $5,000 program that I trained live at first, I then sat down, used the same materials, and I wrote this book. And that's where it came from. So it was a nice strategic byproduct. It was like an 80-20 on how to write the book. But man, what I didn't know is I wrote a manual, which I guess you're not supposed to do that, Chris, right? When you write books, you're not supposed to make them technical. Like here's everything you should do in the introduction. Here's the exact techniques you should do procedurally. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5, do this. And so that's why over time people are like, man, dude, for $10, I can kind of learn the whole formula. I'm like, yeah, because here's what's important, Chris. I don't make my money teaching other people how to do webinars. I make a small, tiny amount of money doing that. I make a majority of my money using webinars. And I make far more than I ever could teaching how to do webinars by actually using them. But
for sure,
as a result of using them, I can document and I can teach. And this has become the #1 best-selling book of all time when it comes to webinars.
That's incredible. And where do people find that?
Amazon, baby.
Amazon, baby. Yeah. Every one of my books, Amazon. It's kind of funny. I was talking to a good friend of mine. He's a New York Times bestselling author, Wall Street Journal bestselling author. He used to be with, or maybe still is, Napoleon Hill Foundation. And I just said, so I'm writing my 6th book and I need a publisher. And he says, no, you don't. He says, the worst possible thing you can do. He says, that's the old days. This is the new days. And he just laid it out to me in 5 minutes. He said, I'll publish your book. I'm not going to charge you to do it, but only so you can say that you have a publisher, because he said it's the dumbest thing anyone can do. So you're right. Amazon has literally killed the publishing business.
Yep.
Interesting.
Like that.
So how do people work with you? Like, and do you take on any client? Are you specific to certain clients? Like, how does that work?
So we try to do a service business. And again, the dilemma was we made more doing it for ourselves than we did even from clients. And we weren't very good at services. I've just discovered, like, in mass. We very rarely, occasionally will take on partners. Either we publish. So when we did the $57.9 million launch, that was somebody we published. So somebody had a really awesome solution. They brought it to us. We put it under our umbrella and we built all the marketing around it. And other times we will do exclusive marketing partnerships where they create the content and they fulfill it. And then we do all the marketing around them. So we have 2 clients right now that we're doing this for. So we have 1 client we're publishing right now. We have 2 clients that we're exclusive marketing partners for. So we are interested and open to entrepreneurs generally that are doing mid 7 figures usually on their own, that have an opportunity in a field that we play in. We play in a couple different industries. So we have connections in those industries. We know where the bodies are buried, et cetera, and so on. So we sit down and we talk it out. And if it makes sense, man, if we can partner together in any way, shape, or form, I'm interested in having that conversation. So that's how those things come to us. We don't necessarily look for them, but here's my ultimate quest, Chris. I want to find, for the markets that I serve, the very best product for them. Meaning best, not in terms of sales, best in terms of, if X number of people take this, the highest percentage of them are successful when they're done with the program. I want success stories. That's how I validate how good a program is. And not these funny business guru success stories, right? Like where you intentionally say, oh, hey, I taught you how to be a bestseller. Well, yeah, you did in a category, and you're international too, because you published on the Canada version of Amazon in a category where if you sell one of them, you're the bestseller, right? That's not a success story, right? So we gotta weed through those, and then the whole, well, you called your buddy up who was already a millionaire, and you told him one technique, and he made $100,000, right? That's not a typical use case that an average user could vibe with. So we're like, where are the no shenanigans, no funny business, real successes coming from? Let's find that product. Usually that product is buried in obscurity because that person has spent more time on perfecting their craft than they have on their marketing. And so the best products are always hidden because these are true stone cold subject matter experts who don't have time to market. They don't have the skill to market. So we're on an ever ending quest where are people winning because their product is so good. That's the best marketing they have, is word of mouth and referrals, or they're in a new opportunity. Like we're publishing a guy who's on TikTok right now. Like I know nothing about TikTok, but I know when I've done the research, his TikTok approach for the audiences we reach is head and shoulders above any other one that I could find or recommend or do myself. So if we can find that, then we take the best marketing and combine it with the best, most effective product. The way I look at it like this, you have a chef and you have ingredients. That's what makes the meal. You can be a great chef, but if you have subpar quality of ingredients, you're going to only have a meh meal. You get the best ingredients possible, but if you're not a very good chef, again, the meal isn't going to be the great. But when you have the best ingredients, which is the product or the offer, and you have the best chef, which is the marketing, that's when things go crazy. So, occasionally, rarely, we find somebody that lines up. And if that's the case, I'm really excited to take a look and see if anything can come from it.
Well, it's really interesting. I wasn't going to talk about this online. I was going to talk about this just offline, but I got to do it because this will just make a really good episode. When I first was sent over the request to have you on my podcast, because I get tons of them, the initial thing I said was no. And then my team pushed back and said, no, really, go on and look at his stuff. And I did. And I didn't really know what I was looking at. But something I saw rang to me, and I don't know what it was, but it did. And I said, yes, let's do this. And even coming on this morning, like even when I was talking to you, I still was hazy about what it was you did. What you just described by telling me and this entire audience your very specific need and what your avatar is, like, no, listen, like this podcast is a relatively bigger one, like tens of thousands of people will see it, but I don't mean to come off strong, but you just found it. Like I have exactly what you're looking for, but I don't have a cook. Yep. And, if nothing else happens, like hopefully we can work together and come up with that, because I think once you dig into what we've created with Private Money Club, you're going to see that. And it's cool because this whole audience knows about Private Money Club. So folks, I want you to just remember this podcast episode, because if things do materialize, I want you to like think a year from now, 2 years from now, where Private Money will be, and just always point your finger back to the guy you're looking at on the screen, not me, Jason. Actually, here, let me change the mode here, because, I know you're probably staring at me because I'm talking, but there we go. There, we're both on there now. You look at him. That'll be the man that puts Private Money Club in every household. So that's how it happens, folks. And, it's like sometimes when I put this podcast out, everybody, because of the size of it, because I've been doing it now for 6 freaking years, like, oh my God, you got to monetize it. Oh my God, you should be doing this. You'd be selling your products on it. And I never do, because I just like giving value. But folks, if any of you are thinking about doing something special, like a podcast, do it not for you, not for self-interest, not because you think you're going to monetize and make all this money. Do it because out of the 100 or however many episodes you do, you're going to find one person like Jason that will completely change not just your business, but your entire financial future. That is why you do something, folks. But it sometimes does take 100, sometimes 200, sometimes 300 tries before you find the one that changes it all. Jason's probably thinking, this dude's completely crazy. We just met at the beginning of this podcast, but somehow, and he doesn't know this yet, I've got a very sick sixth sense that when I see someone and hear someone say specific things, I just know without knowing. And it's just cool. I did that publicly, so all of you can hold us accountable or hold me accountable, because you might be like, oh, how'd that Jason thing work out? And I'm like, well, he didn't like our product and didn't end up taking us on. And then you can all laugh at me, but hey, that's the way business works. Jason, how would everybody learn more about you, find you, and potentially talk to you or your team about what you do?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, if you follow me on YouTube, that's our biggest push right now. Like, I have no idea what I'm doing there. I'm learning. It's really exciting, and I'm loving it because I'm hungry again. So that's the primary focus of free content that we're pushing out. Obviously, my book, I think, is a must-have. It's a masterclass in persuasion as much as it is in webinars, which is useful in any situation. And then if you want to work with us directly, you can just email us at support@rapidcrush.com, and we'll take a look at it.
Awesome. So folks, in the description, we'll put the link up for the book. We'll put his YouTube on there. And then obviously you got that email and you got the direction to then take the next step. So folks, I hope you enjoyed this. I know it was a little different than what I thought it was going to be, but what the heck? Sometimes you just got to take that leap, go out on the limb and just push. And that's what we just did here. So enjoyed it very much. Jason, thank you for your time. And folks, thank you for making this podcast what it is. And continue to show up, because every episode we're going to bring you the value and we're going to help change your financial future. So we'll see you on the next one.